tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up as one of the Hart family, coming from that huge family with the legendary dungeon right there in your basement of your home.
It was kind of fascinating, I grew up in I was like one of the first, so I actually didn't know anything else, but it was kind of fascinating to grow up just in the wrestling business and within that whole spectrum, it was a trip for sure, and then it was kind of interesting, obviously, the wrestling business. I was like I was actually the first of the Hart kids to get into the wrestling business, so I was never really a mark after I got in, like later on when Brett and all of them attained the stardom that they attained in the WWE, I'd already I'd already wrestled quite a bit, so I guess better informed about all the variables of the business, but it was it's really fascinating, and I got a lot of satisfaction out of just seeing how many of the Harts kind of became big stars. It's kind of satisfying to see them kind of evolve into what they became outside of Calgary, not just within our own little backyard, but they became huge global icons, so that was kind of nice, and I was happy I had been able to contribute, I guess, in some ways, because I was sort of the booker and running all the ideas out here, and that was sort of, where they initially got their starts. But yeah, it was a fascinating experience just coming up and growing up in the wrestling business and being part of something that spawned so many iconic superstars.
Was there a lot of pressure for you and your brothers being attached to the Hart name when you first broke in, do you think, coming from that background with Stu as your father?
To a certain degree was, as I said before, I was the first of the so-called Hart kiddies to get in the ring. I think there was a fair bit, because my dad had been a huge star, he was sort of like in the, I guess, the generation of like the Luthez and Pat O'Connors and Peter Maivias and that bunch, so it was a bit of pressure, fans, it's always sort of like, I guess you'd say, a double-edged sword, because the name and the fame or whatever was kind of enhancing. It was an inside track for you to get into the business. At the same time, their expectations were high, so you had to, kind of live up to them. If you didn't, then you're deemed a colossal failure, so that's part of it. I've seen some guys that rose to the occasion, and I've seen others that were sort of son of a star, and they, fell short of the mark and were kind of deemed abject failures, I guess, so it's kind of good or bad depending on which, how you convert it and how you deal with it, I guess,
Yeah. Now, so when you first broke in, this was in the Stampede territory, and this is back before WWE or WWF at the time, their global expansion. So tell me a bit about Stampede and sort of how big that was for people in Calgary and Canada in general in the territory days.
it was kind of a funny, back in those days you didn't have all the other, I guess, additives, some of them artificial, like social media and all that stuff. So in essence, you had to sink or swim on your own. If your wrestling wasn't decent and wasn't getting over with the fans, the business wouldn't be surviving. So, but in its own way, it was a phenomenal learning environment. And I think when I started booking or handling the matchmaking for my dad in around 1980, and I was sort of bent on being different. A lot of the promotions at that stage had a propensity for just pushing big guys, and none of the Hart kids, myself included at that time, were that big. We were all under 200 pounds and kind of skinny. And I'd wrestled a bit in England in some of those places, in Japan, and I noticed some of the best guys in those places weren't necessarily the biggest. So I started putting more emphasis on speed and skill rather than just size, and because of that, I was sort of developing these leaner, meaner, sort of almost like evolution. The dinosaurs were phased out or whatever, but I had these guys like Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid, and some of them that were perceived, a lot of the traditionalists over here thought they were way too small, and they're, almost kind of going to be laughed out of the arenas because they were, half the size of these big, lumbering heavyweights that had been the mainstays up till that point, and their speed and their skill, and we put a lot more emphasis on speed and agility and wrestling and all like that, and we became almost like a cutting edge promotion, and those guys later on, became like the huge thing in Japan and even in the WWE when they got there years later, So yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of with the legacy of Stampede is, for all intents and purposes, we were never really a clone or a copy or trying to, conform to the pre-existing norms of anything else. We were always striving to be our own compelling, original outfit, and I think that's why we enjoyed such success, and why we turned out so many guys that were, ultimately considered among the best workers, the Bretts and the Dynamites and the Davies and the Benoits and the Jushin Ligers and guys like that. It was something we instilled in those guys, and they certainly kind of really lived up to that creed, I guess,
You had the Kiwis over there as well, Sweet William and Crazy Nick, long before they were the Bushwhackers.
Guys, they were actually serious heels, villains over here, when we brought them in, and I think we originally brought them in the early 70s, and like 74 maybe, something like that. And nice guys. I found them to be very professional and, kind of ironic. They're, not to knock them, they're almost now more perceived to have been like clowns or lovable buffoons or whatever, but I knew them, they're actually fairly serious villains and good workers, took good bumps and had really good ring psychology, and they were very good at making anyone they looked with look good, you know, and just real good guys. So Luke and Butch, you know, it's gone through a few names. I used to know them as Nick and Luke or whatever, you know. But yeah, there was actually some of the better wrestlers in the history of the business came out of New Zealand. You know, I hope they're well remembered. Pat O'Connor's, and I remember when I was a kid, my dad had a guy from New Zealand. His name was Dick Hurstich, but he wrestled in the States as Ray Gordon. I was told he was one of Pat O'Connor's cronies. I think he's even a bit older than Pat, but you know, he was a great worker. And John Da Silva, Big Maori, he was up here for us when I was a little kid. And I think even Peter Maivia had some roots to New Zealand as well, you know. So there was some really outstanding talent coming out of New Zealand, you know, and there's probably a lot of guys I'm not even, sad to say, familiar with that were out of New Zealand. The guys I alluded to, you know, made it to the North America, so that's why I'm kind of familiar with them. But very good, there's some very good wrestlers coming out of New Zealand, you know, that were just top-notch professionals and very well respected all over the world. You know, I'm sure you probably heard of all those guys, and I'm sure any of your listeners probably that are old enough to remember those guys would agree that those are guys, you know, tremendous workers, the Pat O'Connors and the Dick Hurstiches and the John Da Silvas and some of those guys.
So did those guys sort of contribute to your decision to come down to New Zealand for a little bit? And how did you actually wind up getting down here? How did that get organised?
There was some, I had wrestled a fair bit in Hawaii and South Pacific before that. At the time I was the NWA World Mid Heavyweight Champion, and there was a promoter in New Zealand, I'm sure you're familiar with, named Steve Rickard.
Definitely.
And he was doing a tour of like the Southeast Asia, like Singapore and New Zealand and Australia and I think Hong Kong and some of that, in conjunction with a guy named Terry Priest. And he called me up and said he had the World NWA, which was the big thing at that time, the World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair and Harley Race were signed up for this tour, and he was seeking to get the NWA World Mid-Heavyweight or Junior Heavyweight Champion, which I was holding at that time. And so he, invited me over, and I was happy to go over. I actually went over with my brother Keith, and we had an awesome time, you know. I remember Christchurch and Wellington and Auckland, and it was a nice place, and had a lot of fun. You know, you met a lot of people, and the crowd was very, pleased. They were very enlightened and responsive. They seemed to know the difference between good wrestling and lousy wrestling, and so I that's basically how I ended up down there. And sad to say I haven't been had the opportunity to come get back since, but I had very fond memories of New Zealand, the people and everything. It was seemed like a great place, and I'd love to get back there again.
That's wonderful to hear, Bruce. Wonderful to hear. Now, you've come from Canada, you spent a bit of time in the UK as well, so how did New Zealand and the South Pacific and that general tour, how did they compare to the other territories at the time? Was it competitive with anything else being offered up in the world? Or?
Yeah, I remember I had met Steve Rickard before. When I was a kid, he was wrestling for my dad at first starting, and then I ran into him in Hawaii when he was partners with Peter Maivia, who was an old buddy of his, I guess, or something. But from what I understood, New Zealand used to be a very thriving and vibrant territory in the 70s or whatever. I think Steve Rickard told me he used to bring over a lot of Americans, and I wasn't sure if they were in conjunction with the Australian promotion, which was, I think, pretty successful back in the 70s as well. I'd hear about the Jim Barnett and that bunch that had a bit of the wild and over extreme type stuff with King Curtis and Mark Lewin and the bloodbaths and all that stuff. But yeah, I gathered New Zealand had been a similar type of territory or promotion as to what we had over here in Calgary, and I'm hopeful that maybe at some time, those types of regional promotions such as that might, come back. I think that is one of the things our business needs more than anything right now is the grassroots all over the world really need to be resown, and I think, if WWE was a little bit smarter or using better judgment, they would be going out of their way to encourage the resowing of the seeds at the grassroots, because that's where the talent though came from. Biggest indication to me that there's a huge need for new talent right now, and is the fact that WWE seems to have to keep recycling, Dwayne Johnson and my brother Brett and Shawn Michaels and Mick Foley and The Undertaker for the 40th year in a row at WrestleMania or whatever, but there's not that many really dynamic new guys coming in. And it's because there's not that many legitimate territories or promotions that are producing talent, and there's a few, kind of nondescript ones in the States that they're kind of making out like they're producing talent, but the big problem I find is they're all trying to be like a, kind of an illicit copy of the WWE. In fact, I think they'd be far better advised to be trying to, develop their own brand of talent, which is all we ever did in Stampede Wrestling. And any of the guys that have come from the indie promotions in the last few years that have actually become notable stars in WWE, like, say, Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson and Phil Brooks, CM Punk, and some of them they were always sort of their own type. In my estimation, they were not trying to be a clone or a copy of somebody in WWE. They're actually having the wherewithal to go out and try to be something new and different, which is where it's at. And there's a zillion Elvis impersonators out there. that are starving and having to work day jobs and stuff. But I think to succeed these days, you got to actually dare to be different and, you know, chart your own course, not be a copy. And too many of the guys I see in WWE that are getting pushed either because they're big, you know, one-dimensional muscle heads, or they're, you know, kissing somebody's ass, one or the other, you know. So.
What's your take then on the WWE developmental system and that new performance centre that they've opened up in their attempt to sort of try and get some new talent in?
I'd say the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. I can't honestly name too many guys that have been, you know, great workers or decent workers that have come out of there. You know, maybe you could tell me some of them. I can't name one offhand.
No, that's fair enough.
I think part of the problem is, even if they are getting good training, and I'm not sure that they are, but the other half of the equation is you actually have to give them an environment, a working environment, or a place where they can apply what they've learned in training for like a year or two, where you're actually just working in front of a crowd on 5-6 days a week, 52 weeks a year type thing, and actually learning how to interact with your opponent and learning how to work the crowd and do all those things. And I don't think NXT or whatever, you know, I'm not a big fan of all those bogus reality shows and crap like that. The best thing you could do with new wrestlers you're training them is send them off to different promotions where they just develop their persona and learn how to work and learn how to interact with each other and learn how to work a crowd and all like that. And do it far away from the WWE's fans. So if and when you become a decent performer or whatever, you want to hit the WWE with, you know, like a superstar, you know. As I see too many of these guys, they come in there and they barely learned how to work. Like, I see all those Nexus guys a few years ago, most of them hadn't learned how to work before. They were already inflicted on the public when they got there, and then once the fans already have these preconceptions, it's tough to become a superstar as you're already developing, you know. So in the old days, when you'd go to one territory or another, you know, like, when you finally sent a guy like Dynamite Kid or Benoit or Owen or Baby Boy or whatever to the WWE, they were already ready for stardom. I see too many guys that are going into WWE that might even have some potential, but you know, they get sent in there before they've really learned how to work, and you know, and the fans tend to you know, kind of have a diminished regard for them because they're not Superman when they arrive, you know. So that's why I think they need to really reestablish the promotions. I'm not sure what it's like in New Zealand or whatever, but if I was a wrestling fan in the last 20 years, I would feel severely shortchanged because even, I'm not sure if and when WWE goes to New Zealand, or if they come to Calgary, which is, you know, in North America at least, but they come here maybe once a year, and that certainly doesn't sustain the people's appetite, you know. I can't imagine if you had rugby, you know, they played one game a year every 18 months or something. I don't know how that would sustain the
No, that would not sit well with the New Zealanders.
So I think WWE needs to, I'm not sure why the hell they went out of their way to get rid of all the promotions back in the day anyway. I think it was insecurity or paranoia. They thought they needed to wipe out all the competition, but in actuality, all they did was killing the golden goose that was laying all the eggs. They were getting a steady supply of guys like the Bulldogs and Brett and Owen and Benoit and Jericho and all those guys from Calgary, and they're getting guys from all the other promotions, and they should have been nurturing those promotions and trying to, support them rather than going to inordinate lengths to get rid of them.
Now, your last appearance in WWE, you served as a special guest referee at Brett's match against Mr. McMahon at WrestleMania 26. What are your thoughts on that whole angle heading in there, Brett getting revenge for Montreal, and that WrestleMania moment for the Hart family?
I got down there, they induced us to come down there. I think the main reason when I originally went down there is because they were planning on inducting my dad into the Hall of Fame, and they invited us down for that, but they had this other subplot with Brett fighting Vince, and they wanted the Harts to be part of that. And I remember they took us out to the football stadium in Phoenix there where they're having WrestleMania there, and I remember they ran this finish by us, which entailed all the Hart kiddies and the nephews and nieces and all the other, it's about 15 or more, accompanying Brett to the ring, and then we were some kind of a contrived lumberjack match or something. We were supposed to partake in beating the crap out of Vince, and I was the biased referee helping Brett. And I remember they ran the whole thing by us, and ended up with the Harts beating the living hell out of Vince, and me helping Brett, and finally Brett putting the sharpshooter on Vince. And I remember they ran it by us, and Michael Hayes, who was Vince's booker or whatever, was like, so what do you think, guys? I think he was expecting like all the other obsequious smoke blowers down there. We were supposed to say we loved it or whatever. And anyway, when I heard it, I sort of frowned, and I said, it sounds like a bunch of crap to me. I said, you got Brett, who's supposedly the best there is or whatever, and his whole family, and me, the crooked referee, all having to gang up on this 65-year-old non-wrestler, and I said the amusing thing is we're the faces. It seems like it's imbalanced, and there's no, kind of ebb and flow or anything to it. I told him this off the top of my head. I said, just, giving a bit of thought to what's already in place here. You got Brett, who's coming back from, a debilitating stroke, and is kind of, this is his first match back, and since he suffered the stroke, I said it would seem to me that, it would make more sense if Vinny, if he's the heel, was getting some heat, and Brett was obviously could be a sympathetic figure. You could play that up all the way. And I said, beyond that, you guys orchestrated some scenarios a few weeks back prior to the show where Brett was injured in some moronic limousine car crash nonsense in the back, where he supposedly seriously injured. So I said, that would only just make it that much easier for Brett to be selling that if any was working his leg or whatever. And then I said, but just off the top of my head, at Royal Rumble about 6 weeks prior to WrestleMania or something, they had some charade with Sean and Hunter where Hunter screwed Sean or something. There was some kind of heat between them. I said beyond that, you had Brett and Sean had the big, kind of 10-plus years in the making reconciliation where they kissed and made up before WrestleMania. So I said just off the top of my head, if you had some scenario where Brett was selling all match and was kind of people are rallying behind him, and he finally makes the big penultimate comeback and puts the sharpshooter on Vince. I said maybe you could have Hunter and maybe Stephanie come running to the ring and take the referee, and then Hunter comes in and ambushes Brett and is about to give him the pedigree. I said at that critical point, who hits the ring but the Heartbreak Kid, and does the hell freezes over, kind of come back on Hunter and maybe gives him the sweet chin music. And then I said, would set the stage for, a match that nobody would have ever conceived of, which in itself is why it would draw. But Brett and Sean, of all people, tag teaming against Hunter and Vinny, and they were all kind of looking like, wow, that's pretty, radical. And unfortunately, much to my chagrin, Brett was the guy who kind of gave it the thumbs down. I said that he couldn't do a second match because of some Lloyd's of London insurance policy or he could only have the one match. But I'm not sure what happened after that, but he ended up coming back anyway at SummerSlam in some, comparatively lame charade with the Nexus and all like that. So, yeah, it was a little frustrating because I think after, when Brett came back after all that hype and all the water that had been under that bridge and all like that, it's kind of sad or frustrating that was the only match he really ended up having. He's really not done anything since, and being the star that he was, I think it was, a waste of his talent on there. They could have come up with some far more compelling storylines to justify, what they had to work with. But it's just my opinion. But
all right then, Bruce. Well, I think we'll probably conclude this interview if we can just talk a little bit about the Hart Brothers University Wrestling School, which is that open at the moment, or are you in the process of reopening that?
Yeah, we're in the process right now of, as I said before, I think one of the things the wrestling business really needs is to resow the seeds at the grassroots and, bring a new generation of wrestlers that are comparable to some of the guys I was mentioning, like the Dynamites and the Davies and the Bretts and the Owens and the Benoits and the Jerichos and like some of the guys I was mentioning that you and I alluded to, like the Pat O'Connors and the Bushwhackers. There was so many vibrant characters back in the 70s and 80s, like the Funks and the Harley Races and the Ricky Steamboats and all those guys, and they're no matter which spin WWE tries to put on it, there's no denying that there's way fewer these days. So that was our main inspiration or, reason for, doing Hart Brothers University and trying to apply, our wealth of experience and our insights and all like that into regenerating, a bunch of new wrestlers. So, it's been going really well, though. We're, hoping that we can kind of, be at the ground floor of, the new generation. As I said before, WWE's, I don't think they're ever going to admit, like, their talent is kind of scraping bottom or whatever, but when they keep having to bring back Dwayne Johnson or my brother Brett or Mick Foley or Shawn Michaels or Brock Lesnar or whatever, it tells you all you need to know about the new generation. There's, the only guy, like the Daniel Bryans and the CM Punks, they're byproducts of some of these smaller promotions in the States that, like Ring of Honor and some of that. But to the best of my knowledge, I don't recall any really notable stars coming out of NXT or any of that, So that's why I believe there's, a huge upside, and I'm certainly not even seeking to necessarily develop talent for the WWE. I'm more looking to, develop talent just for the business itself and maybe, be part of the renaissance or the rebirth of the wrestling business. I'm hoping maybe this might spawn some kind of growth in, I'd love to see like New Zealand or Australia or Japan or all these places starting to, come back, the revival of all those so-called territories, and exchanging talent and guys having the opportunity to make a living in the wrestling business, not aside from being like in the WWE, I'm hopeful that the WWE will get their head out of their butts or open their damn eyes and realize that if the business was, stronger globally and all these other places, it would be of huge benefit to them. That's the way they should be seeing it, not, we got to, put them out of business because they might be a threat to us. They should put aside their paranoia and their tunnel vision and be supporting and aiding and abetting any of those developments. So in a long-winded way, that's what the HBU is about. But I'm hopeful that we might, get some Kiwis, some people from your part of the world up here, and I know our promotions guy, Bob Johnson's been talking about maybe having us come to New Zealand and doing like a 4-week seminar down there or something like that, and trying to, that might be something down the road as well, we're sort of open to, different kind of suggestions and whatever. So, but yeah, as I said before, we're developing training guys right now, and anybody that's looking to get into wrestling, we'd be more than happy to hear from them.